Le Fela Porrick Sonne Deutsch. Le Fela Porrick Sonne Deutsch. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you. My Gaelic is limited, but on a day like today, I certainly would love to get it right. So I think I got that one right. Beautiful, fantastic lineup of whiskey today, and a wonderful surprise at the end of this, of my participation in this. The whiskeys are immense. I want to thank everybody who's participating. This is something that we've been planning for a while, and obviously doing this on St. Patrick's Day was very, very important to me. And doing it with three fabulous whiskeys. That is Green Spot Chateau Montelena. That is the Teeling, the Brabazon Series 2. And most of all, the elusive, the hard to get, the secondary market 800 a bottle Blue Spot. For those of you who don't, were around back in December last year when I talked about my acquisition of Red Spot. I spent 5 weeks in Ireland in the summer of 19, and I could not get a bottle of Red Spot. I come back to the States. My nephew was in college in Boston, and he happened upon a couple of bottles in Gordon's in Temple Place. Called me from there at that hour of night with a few beers on him and said, DJ, you're looking for Red Spot? I said, geez, yeah, for the last 6-7 months. And he goes, there's 3 here. I said, buy them. He goes, I don't have any money. I said, okay, well, let's figure this out. What cash apps do you use? And I found one that he used, Zale, I think, that I didn't use, but I had someone in New York that used Zale, and they used Venmo that I used. And lo and behold, he bought me my 3 bottles of Red Spot. I flew to Boston the following week to get them. That's how in love with the Spot collection I am. Very nice surprise at the end, so don't leave early. We have a wonderful cameo later coming on. So without further ado, I'd like to get started. Cheers. Happy St. Patrick's Day. It's wonderful to be here. Let's get into whiskey. Enjoy your corned beef. Enjoy Memphis's fine weather. We've had a rough time the last few years. Obviously, pandemic last year, and what's left of it this year with our beautiful potentially thunderstorms later today, and there's talk of a tornado. So if you do get notification, just take your whiskey and your iPhone into the basement for this proceedings. Okay, don't take any chances. So what are we trying to achieve with our tastings here? We love to look at the whiskey, and I've already poured my first, and that's the Chateau Montelena. And right away off the bat with this whiskey, the first thing I noticed is it has that little sort of orange, reddish hues coming from it, and definitely imparting the Zinfandel influence on this. What else are we trying to do? We're trying to nose it, trying to taste it in the front of the palate, back of the palate, and all the way to the finish. Remember now, the finish is super important for us and how we generally judge our whiskeys. So, onwards. Cheat sheet here I love to use. On the left is whiskeys from around the world, the different styles. Ireland usually having 5 or has 5, blended malt, single grain, single malt, and blended grain. Sorry, that would be Scotland. Ireland has 4, and we've actually covered them all. Today we're doing pot still, 1 and 3, and we're doing single malt in the middle, the Brabazon from Teeling. So we're covering 2 out of the 4. Japan, blended and single malt, mostly of Scottish pioneering. And the United States, bourbon, Tennessee corn, and then the others, we just listed the other country. On the right there, look at a little cheat sheet on what's the law, what's required, what barrels, what can be charred, and then there's some other notes in there of various different specifications for the different countries. Very, very helpful, okay? Another lovely sheet I love to share is who's drinking the whiskey and who's drinking the most. Let me just start by saying it's been tough in Ireland. 2020 has been very difficult on our whiskey business. Fantastic article in the Sunday Business Post about 2 weeks ago that got sent out to me, and talks about, you know, struggling times. Even though people are ordering a lot more online, the whiskey sales, they're saying down by about 20 to 25%. That would be Irish whiskey in general. Worldwide, in the US, which is one of the biggest markets for Irish whiskey. It's down worldwide. It's down itself in Ireland. Ireland being in category 4 lockdown still and will be there until May. So who's drinking the most? Well, historically, per capita, the French. Find that absolutely fascinating to share that with people. Had a tasting the other night and I asked the classroom if anybody could get it in 5. I'd give them a prize to today's tasting. Well, the prize to today's tasting was not 1. First is France, second is Uruguay, and third is United States. Ireland comes at 8. Satisfactory, shall we say. We still love our Guinness, beers, and lots of other alcohols. Little map of Ireland there, about the size of South Carolina, 31st sized state in America. So we're a small place, makes a lot of noise. Great history, great history, and a great Irish, great whiskey tradition. Would have been one of the largest producers of whiskies, along with the area around the Mulligan Tire and Campbelltown Lock, in and around the 1880s, 1890s, or shall I say the 1780s, 1790s. That drifted immensely all the way through famine, obviously, 1870, 1880, Ireland, onwards to Prohibition, World War I, World War II, the trade wars, taxation on the amount of malt in the barley, etc., etc., etc. I'll take you all the way to the mid-1980s, when we had 2 distilleries left, and they amalgamated to form the Irish Distillers Group Limited, who in turn were purchased and taken over by Pernod Ricard, the French liquor bastion conglomerate. But looking at today, a map from 2019 in front of you, prior to the pandemic, and we're looking at planned and operational on top, we're seeing about 25. And in the bottom there, planned, we're seeing up to 46. Suffice to say, quite a few of those in development planned have already come to fruition. Crowley in Donegal went live in December. And I'm trying to think of anything else there. Nathan Mayo is live and working, but waiting on the whiskey, going through some operational issues right now. Matt Darcy is whiskey on the market, but they're waiting on their own, I believe. I have a few bottles of that at home. And there's some great whiskey. Irish American Mayo. That's our Grace O'Malley experience from our last tasting with Mr. Stephen Cope from my hometown of Ballina, County Mayo. So the future looks great. Currently in a little sort of dip right now. Hopefully no casualties or not too many casualties, please God. And we'll get onwards and upwards again and into the double-digit growth that we've been experiencing for about the last 25 years. So our first whiskey tonight, we actually covered it in a special tasting with the Pernod Ricard Luxury Ambassador back in January of 2020, before the pandemic kicked in. And we actually did Montelena, Red Spot, and Powers John Lane that night. Actually Yellow Spot as well. We did 4. And surprisingly, this scored really, really well. Great, 2 great pictures here. On the left is the historical storefront of Mitchell & Sons, dating back to 1805. First store operation was on Grafton Street. For those who've been to Dublin, Rodeo Drive, Bourbon Street in New Orleans. Then one of the main epicenters of the great city of Dublin is Grafton Street. I went to college there. One of the meeting points I had in my college days in 88 to 92 was to meet people at the McDonald's on Grafton Street. And suffice it to say, the McDonald's, before it was a fast food restaurant and the largest grossing restaurant in Ireland, I believe. Before that, it was a Mitchell & Sons. Mitchell & Sons left there to go to Kildare Street, and now have 2 or 3 stores, Glassstool, the IFSC, and maybe one other store. We'll find out later from our friend Peter, who'll join us later. Another pic there of Grafton Street, roughly about 100 or so years ago. And lots of bikes, lots of pedestrians, pedestrian only street now. And I think what you're seeing are the black taxis, lots of cabs, and great street, great drinking street, great busking street, and great fashion street. I always find myself drifting into a store on Grafton Street and buying attire that you generally don't see in the States. Also has a Disney shop, so my children also love it. And on to Chateau Montelena. Well, Chateau Montelena effectively is Green Spot, which is a 7 to 10-year-old pot still Irish whiskey, aged in sherry and bourbon barrels, but finished to celebrate what we call the wine geese of Ireland, okay? For those who have traveled with me this year in our virtual tastings, we always go back to long way back. In fact, to go all the way back to June 1st, 1690, when we have the Battle of the Boyne, which is the only ever battle to take place where two kings or previous kings of England fought on opposite sides. It is the Battle of the Williamites versus the Jacobites. The Jacobites being the French, Irish, and Scottish, mostly Northern Irish, mostly Southern Irish, versus the Williamites, who are the English, the Danish, and the Dutch, and a small group of Northern Irish. Fought over several days, was won very cunningly by William of Orange, who had basically taken over throne of the monarchy. And by decree, James, who was the previous king, was by decree, and it was basically determined no longer would they have a Catholic as the King of England. So interesting. His daughter, James's daughter, actually married William of Orange. Where does this connect to the whiskey? Well, when we talk about the wild geese, we talk about the exportation or the alignment of Irish troops among local armies of France, Belgium, Holland, a lot of armies in Europe and throughout the world. And then a segment of these sort of wild geese or immigrants, a celebration of them is what we call the wine geese. And that's the Irish immigrants who ended up successfully in the wine business throughout Spain, France, Germany, and California, Australia, Argentina, South Africa, and I mean, it was pretty dense and broad separation of Irishness throughout the world. And obviously today being St. Patrick's Day, that is a celebration of all things Irish. But moving on to Montelena. Montelena is a very famous winery put on the map by a man called John Barrett. John bought the winery in the early 70s, and it's very famous for winning what's called the Judgment of Paris Award. And that's a blind test, originally actually orchestrated by a liquor store that was founded in downtown Paris by a very, shall we say, cocky Englishman. And it takes a lot of kahunas to open a liquor store and sell wine and brandy to the French. So he did that. But one of the things he does, he started a blind tasting. And in 1976, Montelena won the prize as the best Chardonnay or best white wine in the contest. And this is done blindly, and it was unfolded to the judge. The judge were told, well, you've just voted 100%. You've just voted for your first white wine, and it's from the United States. And it was from, on your left, Beau, son of John, and his wife, Judy Barrett. John Barrett's wife was Heidi Barrett. So celebration of all things Ireland, celebration of the wine geese, the wild geese, I guess the losing of the Battle of Boyne that would change history forever in Ireland and in Britain. And without further ado, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the Mitchells. There's a representation of the 5 generations, current operator or owner is Robert Mitchell, and I believe he's 7th in line. And moving onwards to our first tasting, I've already poured it. Your spot range is green bottle, yellow bottle, red bottle. Okay, so your first one green, should have poured it. And we're going to take you through these notes. So I like to nose it, like to tilt the glass plenty. I love a glass like that. And you even get a nice sort of, you can see those hints of what I would call orange, almost pinkish hues. And that's from the Zinfandel casks that are coming from Montelena. Incidentally, Zinfandel is the only wine, the only grape that has its own festival to celebrate their wines. And it takes place in San Francisco every year. And so what does Zinfandel do to the whiskey? Well, they say it adds a lot of jammy, fruity, and some spices to the whiskey. So your 7 to 10-year-old green spot, the mainstay in the pot still range, the six whiskeys, that's the mainstay. What I mean by that is your Montelena and your Barton are finishes of green spot. Your green spot is the only one that basically had an uninterrupted existence. The yellow came back in 14, the red came back in 17, 18, and the blue, which we'll taste later, returned in December of 2020. And as I described it, to be sold out like U2 tickets in Dublin, so probably within a couple of hours. So without further ado, get the nose into this. The first thing you should get is peaches. I say peachy, pink and orange hues. You should get peaches on the nose. You should get jam and apples, peaches and apples, jammy, and then there's some licorice. Licorice is that sort of almost wants to make you sneeze. I then said I'm getting, as I smell it a bit more, I'm getting that wood flavors, wood smells with some vanilla, and I say banana. It's something like vanilla and banana I get very easy with my nose. There's no wrong here, guys. It's your palate. If you were to read the top 5 or 6 guys reviewing this whiskey and gals, you would be flabbergasted at the variation of flavors they're getting. It's such a complex whiskey. I'm going to go ahead and taste it. I always like to do a very small taste, disregard it and taste it again. Still great, even disregarding it. Still great. I like to chew it, try to get it back here, and really expose the whiskey to the top of my thumb. And why am I so in love with the pot still range? It's that first feeling when it goes in your mouth, that beautiful mouthfeel, pot still identity that comes with that whiskey. And I said I'm getting grape notes, some strawberry or strawberry jam. Then I'm getting some nice spices with this, almost like cooking spices. Almost like white pepper, almost with some other sort of cooking spice. Delicious, long, warming, gentle, smooth, fabulous finish. Remember now, this is 46, 92 proof, 46 APV. Like its older brother later, the Cask strength Blue Spot, hides that sort of extra higher alcohol, hides it well, hides it beautifully. It's a delicious whiskey. It flies a little bit under the radar against the others in the range. It's not really in our Tennessee marketplace. It's much more of something you'll find is available online. Price point varies a bit, but somewhere in the dollar range of between 80 and no more than 100 or 110. Probably at Mitchell and Sons in Dublin for about 60 euros, okay? Maybe 70. Finish, I talk about very dry, salt water, and a nice linger of grape or some other citrus fruits. I think the Zinfandel does wonderful things to this whiskey, similar to what the Barton did with the Bordeaux cask finish. Added some Bordeaux earthy notes to the original green spot. This adds some of the Zinfandel characteristics to this particular green spot. Delicious whiskey. Like I said, big fan of having tasted all six. They all have their unique characteristics. They're all beautiful whiskeys, and they're all a celebration of Ireland on this wonderful day, St. Patrick's Day. Go ahead and pour your second. That would be your yellow spot. Your yellow spot will contain a darker whiskey, all natural, non-charred filtered, and that's coming, the name of that is your Teeling Brabazon Series number 2. And so Teeling whiskey. Let's talk about Teeling for a second. Teeling is pretty close to me as well. I've been to the distillery, and I'm glad to say I have a connection to the Teeling distillery. And that connection is the founding father of the Teeling massive enterprise now, which is John Teeling. John was my professor at UCD in the early 90s. Very obviously, very smart and very observing, very futuristic, very pioneering, amazing guy. Be about 75, 76 today. My last visit to the Teeling distillery, I missed him by, I think, an hour or something. I left my card there, student of your 92 class that graduated. And John went from UCD to Harvard in Boston. And as the story goes, like all great whiskeys have good stories. John, on your left, and his two sons, Jack and Stephen, on the right, who run the operations today at a number of different distilleries, including the Great Northern, which is the provider of whiskeys for a lot of the guys that don't have distilleries, the bonders, the sourcers, that a lot of them source their whiskey from Great Northern Distillery in Dundalk. Well, obviously the Teeling distillery on your left there in the Liberties in Dublin is the first built distillery in Ireland in 125 years. It opened in 2014, but going back to his visionary aspects, at Harvard, allegedly, he asked all his students to work their particular homework or thesis on the outlook for the Irish whiskey business. Now, this took place somewhere in the middle to late 90s, as the story goes. And of course, he took the findings from his students' work and turned it into, let's just say, dollars and cents when they purchased the Cooley distillery, and basically sold it to Jim Beam and Sons, and took the funding of that and built their new distillery in the Liberties in Dublin, a state-of-the-art facility producing a great deal of whiskey. And we have actually covered, for those who are with me through this last 3-4 years of whiskey tasting, we've covered quite a few of their whiskeys. We did their Teeling all grain whiskey a couple of years back, but on your right, we did a very special tasting one time, and we did the Teeling Whiskey Revival Series number 4 back in 2018, that I was very honored to share my purchases at the distillery with you guys here at the pub in Memphis, Tennessee. in 2018. So we had a wonderful time sharing that. Now, for the third from the right there, you've got your Brabazon bottling, and that is Series 1, takes a marriage of 6 different sherry casks and marries them together to create batch number 1, limited to 12,500 bottles. Batch number 2, we're tasting today. Beautiful bottle. Nice packaging. I will say the use of generic top. I love the fact that our Spot guys married the top to the actual casing. So I like that, not a generic one. Lovely bottling. And Series 2 is basically another project in cask maturation. And it's bottled to 49.5%, ABV, or 99 proof. So it's a 99 proof whiskey. Obviously, everything in Ireland must be aged 3 years and must be 80 proof minimum. So we're well above that. Actually, our 3 whiskeys tonight are all fairly significantly above that at 92, 99, and 114.7, which is our blue Spot later. So I poured myself my yellow Spot, and I'm going to get on to our tasting notes for yellow Spot. For our yellow Spot bottle, or the Brabazon bottling. So another great look at this. You can see it in my glass there. Nice, darker than the last one, darker than the next one. And I said dark gold, showing the port influence. First initial nose on this, coming after the Montelena, you really should cleanse with some water. Definitely cleanse before the blue Spot. Plenty of water. I say musty. It's got that musty sort of initial nose. And then I said it's creamy, honey, and then I'm getting peaches and apricots for me, okay? Could be something else for you. Haven't tasted it quite yet. Gonna give it a second. Remember now, the first taste again, we want to just kick it to the curbside, if you will. I think that's a great description there. Burst. This has a burst on it. This has that sort of, I don't know if anyone remembers us tasting the Cask strength Highland Park, has that little pop in your mouth, initial pop of fruit in your mouth. And then what else am I getting? But for me, marmalade. I said orange marmalade. And I said strawberry jam. And now, if you tie it in with the finish, cloves come to the forefront there. A lovely, nice finish of oak. And I said maybe cloves. I'm more inclined to say cloves now. Tasted this a few times, but coming directly after the Montelena. So just a little bit more about the Teeling family. They really truly are pioneers. Cask finishing has become their go-to, and then marrying multiple casks. In this case, 6 different port casks are married together to obtain what they're looking for here is this particular taste profile. And like I said, limited to 12,500 bottles of this, which really is nothing. Is it available in the States? Very, very limited. It's very limited. Our bottles for today were actually sent from Dublin for this tasting. Lots and lots of nice and dried fruits. That's the port influence. The age of the whiskey, I should go into it. Okay, there's quite a bit online about, fairly transparent in their production of this. Whiskeys are aged between 7 and 16 years. So if it was to have an age statement, it would have to be a 7-year-old whiskey. Obviously, it's a non-age statement whiskey, but there are whiskeys up to 20% of this batch of 5 different port barrels, 20% are 16-year-old single malt that are finished in port casks. So predominant maturation would have taken place in ex-bourbon barrels and then finished in port. Incidentally, Series 3 went back to sherry, and to round out the series, Series 4 came back and did another iteration of port, or older port barrels, okay? So very interesting, very groundbreaking in their use of barrels, and a very nice APV of 49.5. So give yourself a little swirl there. Take it, have another taste before we move on. Love to know, by the way, guys, how we're ranking these 1, 2, and 3. If you would be so kind during it to send, even if it means you're sending me an email, I love to know what people think 1, 2, and 3. We are privileged to have done this somewhere around 20 plus times since the start of the pandemic, and not a single whiskey has failed to be somebody's favorite. So hopefully it'll continue. If it doesn't, I'm blaming St. Patrick, and we'll move on, okay? Our third whiskey tonight is basically the standout of the bunch here. And so before I pass the microphone off to Peter, I wanted to say a few things. First of all, would like to read to you what I said about this whiskey when I tasted it. I did a post to my staff, and I found it to be very, when you taste these things at first, they have a major influence. That's what you're really feeling. I said, tonight I opened and tasted for the first time Blue Spot from Mitchell & Sons. I was like a kid with a new toy. This revered and sought after whiskey sold out in Ireland on the same day, actually within hours, but on the same day as its release, December 2020. At 58.7 APV, it hides its alcohol very well. Lots and lots of layers from nose to palate. Chocolate, spice, nuts, brandy, cherry-like flavors come through galore. I'm now proud to say that I've tasted all 6 in the range, and all 6 are magnificent in their own special way. So with that, I'd like to pass the mic to Peter Dunne. I'd like to first add that Peter commenced his career at Mitchell & Sons on April 14th, 1970. I was born in 69, but Peter will celebrate 50 years at Mitchell & Sons in less than 1 month. And for that, we say, congratulations, Peter, for that. And so it's a very fascinating story, Peter's story, a Mitchell & Sons story. Delighted to say that we got to get 2 bottles of this, because I've now found out how hard it is to come by. And Peter will let you know about that a little bit later. But without further ado, I'd like to pass it to Peter. Thank you, Peter, for being so good to do this for our St. Patrick's Day celebration. And so without further ado, I'll pass you to Peter. Please refer to your tasting notes as you're listening to Peter about the whiskey, and do enjoy. And I'd like to just finish up by saying, Sláinte, happy St. Patrick's Day to one and all. Be safe, and we'll, I know we're still coming out of this pandemic. We'll really dial it up next year and have the greatest one ever, where maybe we can do one of these in person on the day. So without further ado, Peter Dunne, Mitchell & Sons.
My name is Peter Dunne. I'm currently, have been a director of Mitchell & Son for many, many years. I joined the firm, I was a little bit foolish in my early years of 19 and whatever, and my godfather introduced Bobby Mitchell to me and my father. They were all great mates, rugby mates. And so they thought that maybe if they could take me into the company, I think the expression was to do something with me, because I was a bit, being a bit loose foolishly and out and about, and wasn't really studying, and so on and so forth. So I joined in April 1970. So next month I'll be 51 years in the company.
Oh my God!
And back in April 1970. In fact, the day I joined was the day that the Apollo 13 was safely brought back after the near catastrophe. So it was, just to put it in perspective, it was also the beginnings of the riots in Belfast, the end of the Beatles, and basically the year before I had planned to go to Woodstock, in fact, the festival, which was in August of '69, I think. But anyway, I went in and I worked straight into the cellars of the company, where we were bottling everything, for port and rum and Pimm's. Sherries were big with us, so we had a lot of empty sherry casks. I would have gone right through from the beginning to where I am now, in fact. But a little bit about Mitchell's, which is, I mean, it's not difficult to find out, but you'll find that Mitchell's was founded in 1805, which is the year of the Battle of Trafalgar, when Admiral Nelson defeated Napoleon and the French and the Spanish Armada combined. So it was a very, very big year in the history of England and of sea warfare, as it were. So that was 1805. It's the first shop, as it were, was a restaurant in Grafton Street, which is Fifth Avenue of Dublin, I suppose would be the best way to describe it. And the shop became very well known as a restaurant, as a confectionery, and the family were given a royal appointment to the royal family in London. So we were very much in a different era. This is 50 years before the famine in Ireland. And Grafton Street was still quite a very special street even in those days. Women used to go in there in the afternoons, and rather than be seen drinking port, they used to order a pot of tea, and with the teacups and everything, and then the waiter, who knew them, and there was a wink here and a wink there, used to serve them port in teapots, so that and they drank their port from teacups, which was quite a big tradition. But anyway, that was in 1805, and in fact, the existing building still is there with 1805 over the doorway, over the portico. It is now gone from the sublime to the ridiculous, in that it is McDonald's outlet on Grafton Street. But it's still there. We moved in 1887 to a street called Kildare Street, which is where our Dáil is, which is the Irish government, and that was a very, very much like the Square Mile in London. It was an extremely important place. It was formerly the home of John Healy Hutchinson, who was a provost of Trinity College at the time, and that was his home. There was only a 3-minute walk from Trinity College, which is very much historical college in Ireland and in England. So I bottled Green Spot, in fact, from sherry butts. So what we emptied the sherries. We had Mitchell's Dry, Mitchell's Amontillado, and so on, and we had these sherry casks. So we used to buy what was called loose whiskey from Jameson, and bring it down in steel drums down to our bonded cellar, which was a customs bond, and mature it for 10 years. And at that time, then we introduced a blue spot of 7 years old, a yellow of 12, and a red of 15. And they lasted for quite a while. Those cellars were beautifully, temperature was just constant. It was just perfect for maturing. So in fact, the bottle I would have bottled would be the original one, which is this one, the Green Spot 10-year-old. You can see, so Kildare Street and so on. That's the capsule, which you won't be able to see, but it has Ireland 18, which was our bottling license to bottle, a metal cap on it and so on. And this was given to me when after about 20 years in Mitchell's, I was made a director, and this was given to me as a gift. So that was 1990, and I still haven't opened it. I probably never will, and I will never sell it, although I believe it's worth a lot of money. So that was, we were really, it came to a pass where Jameson decided that because they were making beautiful whiskey, but by giving it to bars and other bottlers, they weren't guaranteed that the whiskey was going to, the credibility of the whiskey was going to be maintained. So they just dropped everybody except Mitchell family. And for a while, Redbreast, which was owned by Gilbey's, they also had a bottle. But then eventually we became the only people who could buy whiskey loose and age it and mature it. 2 or 3 labels later, we moved on. I don't have other examples of bottles in front of me, but the age specification was dropped, and it became a non-age statement whiskey. So has never been brought back as a 10-year-old, and will never be I don't think in my lifetime, but personally it is my favorite whiskey still after all of the new releases that we have. Jim Murray, author and producer of the Whiskey Bible, came across it in now he's in a certain amount of shame because of remarks he made last year. I'm not sure if you're aware of them, about the Whiskey of the Year, and the Whiskey Bible appeared, whereas it was the Bible. But he came across it in Galway in a pub, and he couldn't get over it. He was on holidays, and he said, if you see Green Spot anywhere, grab it, because it's the best whiskey I've ever tasted out of Ireland. And that took a lot of people, they all stood up and took notice, because prior to that, Green Spot was, any of the Spot whiskies were really sold to gentlemen's clubs. But it was never a brand as strong as Jameson or Powers, or any of those. Jim wrote about it, followed by a visit when I was in the shop, working in the shop in Kildare Street. John Hansel came into the shop with a paper, and it says, is this where I can buy Green Spot? And then he introduced himself as the editor and owner of the Malt Advocate. He brought a bottle home, and he was blown over by Green Spot and started to write about it. And then the world woke up to 2 big writers, big respected writers, and taking such pride in their possessions of Green Spot. So at around that time, well, before that, Irish whiskey and Cork Distillers and Jameson had combined to become Irish Distillers. But he wrote about it, and then that was followed by a book which was the 100 Best Whiskies to Try Before You Die, or Drink Before You Die, by a fellow called Ian Buxton. And we were only 1 of 2 Irish whiskies in the book, and Green Spot got. One of his remarks was that the label was pretty awful at that time. He said it was coelacanth. It really existed in another century. The label was so poor, but the whiskey was so good. So he wrote about it. And then I got a call, in fact, from the Canadian Liquor Board, the Liquor Board of LCBO in Ontario. And they said they'd like to start Green Spot. And normally you would go through a 3, 4, 5-year courting period in order to get a listing in the LCBO. And but they weren't interested in that. They just wanted it straight away. So we were exporting, Mitchell's were exporting Green Spot for quite a while. And then we picked up a customer in Tokyo, and we picked up a customer in Scandinavia, in Denmark. That covered that. But Irish distillers were kind of anxious not to have too much control for us on what was happening. And obviously, with Pernod Ricard in the background, they were looking after the export more, and they wanted to take that on. So we said, fine, you look after export. We weren't geared to do any more than we were doing because we were still a small family company. And in fact, going back to the family, the current Robert Mitchell is the 7th generation of the family, and his father Jonathan and Robert were still working away in the company. So that was a big decision for us to let the export go, but it meant that the whiskey was secured for us. Irish distillers, then Pernod Ricard, recognized the fact that the Mitchell name and being able to link a whiskey back to the origins of the family in 1805 was, apart from the whiskey being very good, was a real selling point. So and then the various colors came through, the yellow, followed by the red, and then followed by blue, which I think you're going to taste. Yeah, a fairly rare bottling, I'm afraid. It obviously none of us could really imagine how dramatic the sales of it would happen. So production wasn't geared for it. And I had a person on from Arkansas yesterday or the day before looking to see could he buy a bottle, because although they put up on their website that all the spots are available, they're not really in the US. It's impossible to get it. And he said, I'm not going to pay the market in the US for a blue spot now is $800. And he said, I'm not going to pay that. So we've decided that the export to private customers, we send spots all over the world. And it's expensive, but it's far better value than paying that market price. So I think you're going to, are you tasting the Montelena today?
Yeah, so we do this series in a range of, we usually have three whiskeys on any given tasting. And the lineup for the St. Patrick's tasting for today is Chateau Montelena, which is a great story about the Barrett family. We're doing the Teeling Brabazon Series 2, and then obviously the featured highlight signature. I had a great experience tasting Blue Spot over the last 2 weekends in very small amounts, but it's just stunning. Stunning is the word.
Yeah. So going back just briefly, when just before when Jim Murray wrote it up, we were the only place that you could buy a bottle in, and that was in our shop in Kildare Street. And for years we persisted in that. Other people wanted to buy it, but we were selling some to England, and then we discovered a neighbour, as it were, on Dawson Street, parallel to our street, Kildare Street, was selling Green Spot. They had pushed us to buy from us, but we wanted the knock-on effect of people coming in looking for Green Spot and then maybe buying some other things. So eventually we decided, when we saw Celtic Whiskey Shop in Dawson Street, who are big players in the whiskey, we saw a Green Spot in their shop window, and we discovered that they were importing it back from Tokyo and UK just because they wanted to have it. So then we opened up the market and we said, fine, we can't fight this anymore. Let's go big. And now we sell it to all the distributors around Ireland. And of course we sell it individually to bars and restaurants and so on. And then our own shop, our own website is, I'd say 50% is whiskey that we sell. It's so because of the spot.
And so the largest seller is being green, right? And then it goes from green to what? Maybe yellow to red.
Yeah, yellow. The availability has dictated quite a lot, and in fact, red is very the production of red is very small as well. And it goes with the expression, what's rare is wonderful. And so it adds an extra cachet to the spot whiskies if you can't get it everywhere. You can get it in France and so on. So the Montelena, I've not met Bo Barrett, but I think it's a wonderful story that I think he bought the vineyard in 1973. He married subsequently a woman called Heidi, who was the winemaker at Screaming Eagle. And between them, they created Chateau Montelena. And 3 years later, they won the best white wine at the Judgment in Paris, which is the most iconic tasting between American and European wines. And the American wines won out. All the French correspondents and tasters and were there, threw their hands up and said, this isn't possible. But Montelena, Chateau Montelena Chardonnay was voted as the best white wine of the tasting in Paris in 1976. To this day, every 10 years, they celebrate that tasting ever since. Sadly, the guy who set it up was Stephen Spurrier, who was the son of Sir John Spurrier, who was the owner of British Leyland. And his father had more or less said to Stephen, don't do anything mad. You've got all the money in the world. Don't do anything mad. And of course, being a sort of an arrogant Englishman, but an extremely nice man, and his wife, my wife and I knew him well, he set up a wine shop, an Englishman selling wine in the center of Paris. His arrogance beyond belief. And so in order to get a bit of PR, he decided to set up this tasting. So that was the Judgment in Paris. In fact, Stephen died last week.
Oh, Lord. And
it has been mourned for a long time. But the movie Bottle Chop is a great movie if anybody ever gets a chance to watch it. So that's the sort of link with Montelena. I have always liked the peachiness of it. I've liked the soft nature of the whiskey, and it's finished in Montelena casks. But before Montelena was Chateau Léoville Barton Green Spot Léoville Barton, and that was a very, very strong link with Ronald Barton and the Barton family, who are one of the only two families in Bordeaux to still own their own chateau. And so the finishing of Green Spot in Léoville Barton, or Léoville Barton, really opened up the whole concept of different expressions of Green Spot. And that's been a great success as well. But again, small production. And I have to say, if we held back for our own use or for selling on the grey market, we would be worth a fortune, just in the same way as any wine producer like Petrus or anybody in Bordeaux. They all keep something ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
Blue Spot, do you want to talk about Blue Spot or the phenomenon?
Yeah, just give us a brief 2 minutes overview on Blue Spot would be fantastic.
Well, of all of them, I think it's the phenomenon. I at the time when it was thought to bring it back, blue is not green, yellow, and red are nice, strong colors. Blue has a kind of, well, it's a democratic color to start with, but blue, and to bring something back as a 7-year-old is strange, having introduced it 12 and a 15 and so on. But definitely a phenomenon. It was launched in autumn. We tried not to put people on waiting lists because we felt that there were a lot of people who would buy it and were loyal to us but couldn't get it. So anyway, it's all gone. There will be another release in this summer, we're hoping. But the uniqueness about Blue Spot is the link with, well, it's bourbon and sherry cask, but it's the Madeira cask that has made the big difference. And Madeira and America, I mean, if you read, I'm reading a book at the moment called The Garden of Good and Evil, and all set in Savannah. And Savannah, there is still a Savannah club of Madeira club of Savannah. So Madeira has very strong links with with America in that it was the drink that was used to toast the Declaration of Independence in 1776, and to this day they still toast it on the 4th of July with the Madeira. And Madeira gives flavors that no other barrels can really give. Madeira is aged so long and then bottled. When we were celebrating our 200th anniversary in 2005, we looked to find a bottle of Madeira 1805, but we found one of 1804 and 1806. And the Madeira was perfect. Most extraordinary. It defies reason as to how it can stay so long and how you can drink it and then put the cork back in and put it and take another in a month or two. Doesn't go off. It is in the making of it. But the island of Madeira in itself is a story, and I won't bore you with it. But people who are linked with Madeira are Napoleon. Obviously, he took. Well, you may know he took a barrel with him to St. Helena. Subsequently found its way back to Madeira, and Winston Churchill tasted it in I think 1940, and it was as lively as it was reported as being when it was Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, and all those links with Madeira are very strong. So it was a perfect thing. I love it for the Christmas cake, fruit, spices and cinnamons and cloves that you get on it. It's a lovely whiskey to have in the family, basically. In fact, I did pour myself a little glass. It's a lot later than it is for you. So if there's anything you want to ask more about it, I can't send you any Blue Spot, unfortunately. But if you keep in touch with me, I will definitely let you know when more comes about. I see I'm in direct sunshine here in my front window.
Okay, I'm going to enjoy a small drop with you.
Okay, that would be nice. That would be nice.
Fantastic. This will be my third time tasting it. I don't taste but a quarter of an ounce when I'm tasting
All right.
it. I'm about to take the kids to school in 10 minutes, and I think what a great way to today.
Congratulations on your twins, I believe. Yeah.
Yes, that's our St. Patrick's Day card, if you can see it.
Oh yeah, lovely. Oh wow.
So
they just gorgeous.
2 older. Back right is Kyla, she's 8. Back left Tegan, and the twins then, and everybody's in their Liverpool jersey. I'm a big Liverpool soccer fan. Another one of my diehards. My whiskey, golf, and Liverpool, and my family rule my life.
Okay, well that's a fair combination. No rugby in there, no.
I watched Ireland Scotland on Sunday. I don't miss it, but it's further down the
okay.
The order. Okay. So
yeah, it's only so much. It's not to do, yeah.
What are you smelling, Peter?
Spice, really, and dried fruit, maybe. I think there's a hint of clove oil on it, and definitely black pepper.
Fantastic.
It's so different.
Powerful nose, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I actually love cask strength whiskey. I think I can drink more cask strength whiskey than I can drink bottling strength 40%, because you savor it so much more. You don't take as big a mouthful.
But it also, this particular cask strength hides its alcohol very well. It's one of the comments I made right away. It hides that high proof. Just so folks, you know, it's 57.8 or 57.
58.7.
58.7. Yeah. So it's pretty potent. In American terms, obviously, it's a 117 proof, right? 118.4 proof.
Right.
Pretty solid for us. The only thing I have stronger up there, I have a Highland Park. I think that's 123 right here at Cask Strength Highland Park.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's all my Scotch behind me, and over here is all my Irish, and my Irish collectibles are up on top there. So. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's a fantastic range. I looked at what have you got, 40 Irish whiskies on the list?
Oh, yeah, but in the tastings, most of the whiskies we do in the tastings are not stuff we're selling at the shop, you know?
Yeah, so yeah, of course.
It's kind of exclusive. So we've probably covered the ground of 150 whiskies. We've gone through all the craft distilleries we can get our hands on. We've got them all the way down to Liberator in Killarney. Maurice O'Connor, he's joined us.
Yeah, that's great. He's a nice guy.
He really is. To Dunville up north. Grace O'Malley was on last week. He's dying to meet you guys over in Westport. Okay. Stephen Cope is actually from my hometown and is very connected to my family in Ballina. So we've gone the whole Dunville up north, Etchelamville distillery. So we've covered a lot of ground. Covered a lot of ground all the way to Derry, the Quiet Man.
Right. And then you've got these famous French fries in there to give you a little bit of a little saltiness, yeah. I mean, we
ventured upon Bastille Scotch in the Cognac region, and there's an Irish connection down there, the Dacour family, and they're of Irish origin from Tyrone, and so they've delved into French whiskey, and we had him on, and we've had stuff's beautiful. It tastes a lot more like Scotch than Irish, in my opinion. It has that sort of peaty smokiness coming from the cognac barrels, which is quite unique. I mean,
it is, but the barrel changing around, whiskey being aged in stout barrels, and then stout being aged in whiskey barrels, and then whiskey being aged in sauterne barrels. I mean, there's no limit to it. There will be. Eventually, we'll run out of barrels to try things out. But I think in Middleton, they are leading the way with innovation, and they planned a long time ago. Distillers like, well, now it's Kevin O'Gorman, but in the past, it was wonderful to think that they put all these whiskies away in Marsala casks, in Madeira casks, probably without the authority of the owners. But they, as distillers, they wanted to keep pushing the boat out and pushing the whole thing. So it was
beautiful finish on this. Still nice warming, but not burning.
Not fiery. Not fiery at all. Not fiery. No.
Totally delicious.
And that is the art of a distiller, to be able to achieve that. Where you have this high strength, but it's not apparent. It's great.
Yes.
I'm
going to sign off, Peter, and say to you, happy St. Patrick's Day from Memphis, Tennessee. Proud to celebrate my Irish heritage with you. And
Sláinte there, and I hope you have a great day. I looked up you've got loads of people, and have a good summer.
I look forward to maybe popping my head in the door and asking for you, maybe drop you an email ahead of time, okay?
Definitely. Cheers.
Cheers. Sláinte.
Thank you. Sláinte.